A point of order.
I would like to table a motion, and that motion is that with regard to the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development's consideration of Bill C-69, an act to amend the Impact Assessment Act and the Canadian Energy Regulator
Linda, just
Act.
a minute.
Yes.
You've got a point of order, and you can't move a motion on a point of order. So what are you doing?
I'm tabling a motion.
You can't table a motion without notice.
Yes, I can. I can table a motion. I can table a motion.
You're giving notice.
I'm giving notice
of a motion.
notice.
You're not tabling. You're giving notice,
I'm giving notice
on
of a motion. I'm not expecting that we're going to debate or vote on it. Okay.
Fine.
Sorry, wrong language.
I was just trying to figure it out. Thank you.
Notice of a motion. Okay, which I think you will find of interest. That with regard to the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development's consideration of Bill C-69, an act to enact the Impact Assessment Act and the Canadian Energy Regulator Act to amend Navigation Protection Act and to make consequential amendments to other acts. A, the chair of the committee write as promptly as possible to the chairs of the following standing committees, inviting them to consider the subject matter of the following provisions of the said bill. 1. The Standing Committee on Natural Resources consider Part 2, Canadian Energy Regulator Act, Part 3, Pipelines, Part 4, International and Interprovincial Power Lines, Part 5, Offshore Renewable Energy Projects and Offshore Power Lines, Part 6, Lands, Part 7, Exports and Imports, Part 8, Oil and Gas Interests, Production and Conservation, Part 9, and Part 4 at General. 2, the Standing Committee on Transport and Infrastructure, Part 3, Navigation and Protection Act. 3, the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development and the Natural Resource Committee and the Transport Committee consider together Part 4. B, each of the standing committees listed in paragraph A be requested to convey recommendations, including any suggested amendments in both official languages, in relation to the provisions considered by them in a letter to the chair of the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development, in both official languages, no later than 9 a.m. Monday, April 30th. And any amendments suggested pursuant to paragraph B shall be deemed to be proposed during the clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-69, and further provided that the members of the Standing Committees of Environment and Sustainable Development may propose amendments notwithstanding the recommendations received pursuant to paragraph B. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have copies that I can circulate.
That's great. We'll take those on board and we'll put that for consideration in subsequent meetings. Thank you very much. So wanted to welcome the ministers to the Environment and Sustainable Development Committee, and we are kicking off our evaluation of Bill C-69, an act to enact the Impact Assessment Act and the Canadian Energy Regulator Act to amend the Navigation Protection Act and to make consequential amendments to the other acts. Very, very appreciative of having both ministers here with us today, and I would like to turn the floor over to you for 10 minutes each, and then we'll go into our rounds of questioning. So thank you. I think Minister McKenna, you would like to go first?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak today about this important piece of legislation, and I really appreciate the hard work of all the committee members. The legislation we introduced earlier this year aims to restore public trust in how the federal government makes decisions about major projects like mines, pipelines, and hydro dams. These better rules are designed to protect our environment, improve investor confidence, strengthen our economy, and create good middle-class jobs. They will also make the Canadian energy and resource sectors more competitive. With these better rules, we are working to build on Canada's strong economic growth and historic job numbers. Avec ces meilleures règles, nous travaillons.
With these better rules, we are working to build on Canada's strong economic growth and historic job numbers.
Colleagues, I've been working very hard to deliver this government's promise to regain public trust in environmental assessment and regulatory processes to help get resources to market in a sustainable way and introduce new, fair processes. As a first step, in January 2016, we introduced an interim approach and principles that will guide decision-making for projects that were already in the system. Ces principes provisoires démontrent clairement que
These principles demonstrate that 1. Decisions will be based on scientific data as well as on solid Indigenous traditional knowledge. 2. We will listen to Canadians' points of view as well as to that of communities. 3. That Indigenous peoples will be consulted in a significant and respectful fashion. 4. That decisions will take into account the impacts of different projects on climate. And 5. That no project already being assessed will restart the process once again.
In June 2016, we launched a comprehensive process to review existing laws and seek Canadians' input on how to improve our environmental and regulatory system. This review was guided by 2 expert panels, 2 parliamentary committees, as well as extensive consultations with Indigenous peoples, industry, provinces and territories, and the public. Le comité d'experts mis en place en
The expert panel, created in August 2016 to examine the environmental assessment process, traveled over 4 months to listen to Canadians throughout the country. The expert panel presented a report to me. This report included a summary of comments received and the way that they were reviewed, as well as recommendations seeking to improve the federal environmental assessment process.
report and engage with stakeholders and Indigenous peoples. Over 1,000 online comments and 160 submissions were received, and over 100 in-person meetings were held with thousands of Canadians from across the country. We then took all the information and input that we heard and released a discussion paper that outlined the government's proposed path forward based on the feedback from the expert report and the submissions provided. This, too, was the subject of extensive consultations both online and in person. On February 8th, I introduced Bill C-69, which is the culmination of all that input. The proposed legislation responds to what we heard from provinces and territories, Indigenous peoples, industry stakeholders, environmental groups, and the public, addressing what matters to Canadians. Bill C-69 will introduce a modern assessment process that protects the environment, supports reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, attracts investment, and ensures that good projects go ahead in a timely way to create new jobs and economic opportunities. First, assessments will consider not just environmental impacts of projects, but also the social, health, and economic impacts they may cause. When making decisions, we will consider whether companies are using the best available technologies and practices to reduce impacts on the environment. And a gender-based analysis will ensure any potential impacts unique to women, men, or gender-diverse people are identified and addressed. Under the proposed framework, decisions will be based on whether a project with adverse effects is in the public interest. A public interest determination will be guided by several factors, including the project's contribution to sustainability, impacts on Indigenous peoples and their rights, mitigation measures that are proposed to reduce the project's impact on Canada's ability to meet its environmental obligations and climate change commitments. Les évaluations stratégiques et régionales
Proactive, strategic, and regional assessments will allow to review the potential cumulative effects of development projects. What's more, this will contribute to decision-making.
Be predictable, provide regulatory certainty, and work across multiple jurisdictions. The new legislation proposes to have one agency, the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, lead all major project reviews and coordinate with Indigenous peoples. One project, one assessment is a guiding principle to drive cooperative reviews and avoid duplication. New tools are available for the Impact Assessment Agency to work collaboratively with jurisdictions and with life cycle regulators, such as the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and the proposed Canadian Energy Regulator, to ensure this principle is met. A new early planning phase will engage jurisdictions, potentially affected Indigenous peoples, and communities to ensure that key issues are raised early so that project proponents know what is expected from them at the outset. Grâce à cette étape de planification et de participation en amont,
because of this early stage planning, we will be able to encourage the public to participate in this dialogue on the field. This phase will allow to simplify the process. This is positive for all.
Be a legislated timeline for decision-making for assessment. These timelines will ultimately shorten project assessments, allowing proponents to spend more time investing in project development to build the Canadian economy. Indigenous peoples are leaders in conservation. They have long been stewards of the environment and have rights related to the management of land, waters, and wildlife. They have knowledge of the land that spans generations, and we will advance Canada's commitment to reconciliation and get to better project decisions by recognizing Indigenous rights and working in partnership from the start. Nous rendrons obligatoire la
It will be compulsory to take into account traditional Indigenous knowledge as well as other data available as well as scientific data. The Indigenous authorities will have more opportunities to exercise their powers and responsibilities through the evaluation assessment bill on the assessment of the impact, and we will increase funding for Indigenous participation and reinforce capacities with impact assessment.
Assessments are grounded in science and that the process is transparent and accessible. The bill proposes a number of measures to address these issues. Greater public participation opportunities will be provided, including during the early planning phase and during the impact assessment process. All Canadians will be assured the ability to participate. Un registre en ligne donnera accès.
An online registry will give access to information linked to environmental assessments for certain projects, including scientific data used during impact assessment. Clear language assessments supporting assessments will be made available to ensure significant participation.
Best available science, evidence, and Indigenous traditional knowledge. Scientific evidence will be tested, and where findings are uncertain, third-party reviews will be available. The bill also proposes to increase transparency by requiring that decisions with detailed reasons are made public so that Canadians can better understand the rationale behind the decisions. As you know, the proposed Impact Assessment Act was informed by extensive consultation, and I'm committed to continuing the dialogue. Depuis que le projet de loi a été déposé à la Chambre des
Ever since this bill has been tabled in the House of Commons, I've met with stakeholders from the industrial sector as well as environmental groups, representatives from Indigenous peoples, as well as my provincial counterparts, in order to obtain their reactions on what has been proposed in this bill.
This year reflect what we have heard overwhelmingly and consistently from Canadians over the past year and a half. They want a modern environmental and regulatory system that protects the environment, supports reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, attracts investment, and ensures that good projects can go ahead, which creates good middle-class jobs and grows our economy. As we always say, the environment and the economy go together. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak to the committee today. I would like to thank the committee for the collaborative approach that you have taken in your work around this table to date, and I look forward to the outcome of your review of this important piece of legislation. Merci.
Thank you very much, Minister McKenna, and we appreciate those kind words for the work of the committee. And Minister Carr, would you like to?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everybody. Let me begin by thanking you for your work, because really the work of committees is at the heart of our democracy. And the fact that it's in the center of this building is a metaphor for how important it is. And I want to say that for ministers to come together to be accountable in front of members of Parliament from all parties is one of the most important things that we ever do. And I look forward to the exchange, which I'm sure might have its spirited moments, and that's the way it should be. And I also want to begin by picking up on something that Minister McKenna said really right at the end of her remarks, and that's the importance of Bill C-69 to ensure that the economy and the environment continue to go hand in hand. So it makes sense for us to appear together. I'm sure members, both Conservative and Liberal, will remember that it wasn't always this way. There was a time when Ministers of the Environment and Minister of Natural Resources would probably not sit at the same table. And when they sat around even their own partisan tables, things were always a little bit tense. Well, we believe in 2018 there is one conversation. And also, the Minister and I were together in Vancouver last week at the Globe Conference, giving keynote addresses, participating in panel discussions, chairing roundtables with Indigenous people, with environmentalists, with leaders of industry, with leaders of clean technology, and it didn't matter in front of what audience. Our message was always the same, the message that we're delivering this morning. And I think it is a powerful message that Canadians see the Minister of Natural Resources and the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change sharing the same table, demonstrating that the economy and the environment are not competing interests, but equal components of a single engine that drives innovation, jobs, and economic growth. That has been our government's vision from day one, and the results speak for themselves. L'année dernière, il s'est créé plus de 4...
Last year, Canada added more than 420,000 jobs, most of them full-time positions, and many of them in our resource sectors. Alberta, a province hit hard by 3 years of low oil and gas prices, is among those posting large job gains, adding 55,000 new positions. Its economic output per capita, again leading the country.
Canadian press last month, Alberta's economy is recovering faster than almost anyone could have expected. And on the other side of the country, Quebec is essentially at full employment, with labor shortages reported in some parts of the province. Not surprising then that Canada led all G7 countries with 3% growth last year, and that our unemployment rate has been hovering around 40-year lows. Such robust growth is difficult to duplicate year after year, we know that. And we also know that governments are a part of it. Job creation is really due to the actions of individual Canadians. Economies have their cycles, but the message is clear. We can create good jobs for the middle class and those working hard to join it. A future built on the 3 pillars of economic prosperity, environmental protection, and Indigenous participation. Bill C-69 is a big part of our vision. It has the potential to transform our natural resources sector by providing project proponents with clear rules and greater certainty, by allowing local communities to have more input, and by ensuring Indigenous people have more opportunities in the development and oversight of our nation's vast resources. That includes our energy sector, which is why we are proposing a new Canadian Energy Regulator, or CER, to replace the existing National Energy Board. We want to create a new federal energy regulator with the necessary independence and the proper accountability to oversee a strong, safe, and sustainable Canadian energy sector in the 21st century. A federal regulator with a modern, effective governance structure, one that includes a chief executive officer who would be separate from the chair, a board of directors that would provide strategic direction distinct from a group of independent commissioners that is responsible for adjudication, and at least one member of both the board and the commissioners who would be First Nation, Inuit, or Métis. That's what the Canadian Energy Regulator Act proposes to do. Under our plan, timelines for reviews would also be shorter, more predictable, and better managed. Project reviews would not exceed 2 years for major new projects and not more than 300 days for smaller ones, all the while continuing to recognize the expertise of the offshore boards and the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. At the same time, the CER Act would make public engagement more inclusive. For example, the NEB's existing test for standing would be eliminated to ensure every Canadian has an opportunity to express his or her views during project reviews, and participant funding programs would be expanded to support new activities. We also want to advance reconciliation by building and funding the capacity of Indigenous peoples to participate more meaningfully in project reviews, as well as recognizing Indigenous rights up front, confirming the government's duty to consult, requiring consideration of traditional Indigenous knowledge, and aiming to secure free, prior, and informed consent. The new CER would have more powers to enforce stronger safety and environmental protections, including new powers for federal inspection officers. All of these enhancements would ensure that good projects can proceed without compromising the environment or engagement, allowing our energy resources to get to markets in responsible, timely, and transparent ways. Canadians have painted a similar picture for our country in this clean growth century. Through the hundreds of thousands who joined our ongoing generation energy discussion to imagine Canada's energy future, the hundreds more who traveled to Winnipeg last fall for our two-day Generation Energy Forum, and the thousands who participated in 14 months of public consultation to draft this legislation. Canadians have told us that they want a thriving low-carbon economy. They want us to be a leader in clean technology, and they want an energy system that provides equal opportunities to Canadians while minimizing harm to the environment. They also understand that we're not there yet. We need to prepare for the future, but we must also deal with the present by providing energy that they can count on when they flick on a light or fill up their cars. A modern energy regulator is essential to that and to ensuring all Canadians have continued access to a safe, affordable, and reliable supply of energy. That's been the role of the National Energy Board since 1959. Under its almost 60-year-old mandate, the NEB has been responsible for making recommendations and decisions on projects, overseeing the safety and environmental performance of facilities, and engaging Canadians. Today, the NEB regulates approximately 73,000 kilometres of international and interprovincial pipelines, and another 1,400 kilometres of international power lines, as well as all of our Canadian imports and exports of energy. Malheureusement, la structure.
Unfortunately, the NEB's structure, role, and mandate have remained relatively unchanged since the National Energy Board Act was first introduced in 1959.
Evolving and adapting with the changing times, and when a modern energy regulator is central to integrating Canada's energy, economic, and climate goals. The new CER would help to address all of that. For example, it would introduce a more inclusive approach to reviewing energy projects by incorporating a full impact assessment of key factors. As well, the CER's mandate would cover emerging energy developments, such as the regulation of offshore renewable energy. And with legislative timelines, the new CER would significantly strengthen investment certainty. So will the new transition period that is based on clear rules, the earlier engagement to identify public priorities, the clearer direction on Indigenous consultations, the coordinated activities between the CER and the new Impact Assessment Agency, and the continued government responsibility for final decisions. Bill C-69 is ambitious but achievable. It is legislation designed for the Canada we know today and the Canada we want for tomorrow. A Canada where we create the growing middle class we all want while protecting the planet we all cherish for generations to come. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister Carr. Before I open it up to questions, I thought we might introduce the rest of the panel up there, your team. We have with Minister McKenna, we have Ron Hellman, the President of Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency. Welcome back. We have Stephen Lucas, Deputy Minister from the Department of the Environment. Thank you for being here today. We also have from the Department of Natural Resources, Christine Tremblay, who's the Deputy Minister, and we have Jeff Labonte, and he's the Assistant Deputy Minister at Major Projects Management Office. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today. So our first question is from John Eldag. Thank you.
Ministers McKenna and Carr, thank you for coming to our Environment and Sustainable Development Committee to speak to Bill C-69. I, like many of my colleagues, believe that this may be the most important piece of legislation that our government passes, and we have passed some very important legislation since forming office. As a British Columbian with strong roots in the prairies, I feel strongly that the current legislative and regulatory framework for projects have, in the past decade, failed our country, including our economy, our environment, and, as importantly, our Indigenous peoples. We're seeing this through the conflict that's arisen, as an example, under the Kinder Morgan pipeline project that affects British Columbians, Albertans, and Canadians. As a government, we added interim principles to address the shortcomings of the legislative and regulatory process left by the previous government for the Kinder Morgan pipeline project, and yet conflict remains. Can each of you summarize for our committee and Canadians who are following these hearings how Bill C-69 will provide clarity and certainty in the process for assuring future projects under federal jurisdiction, how this legislation will provide better protection for our environment, and how future assessments will include the input of Canadians, including Indigenous Canadians, with whom we as a country have a special relationship that requires special consideration. And if you could each take about 2 minutes to provide your summary, that would be really appreciated. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I do want to thank my deputy, Stephen Lucas, as if I don't know your name, but and also Ron Hallman, the president of SIA. They've done an amazing job. Look, we knew when we came in as a government that we needed to rebuild trust in our environmental assessment system. We heard that from environmentalists. We heard that from Indigenous peoples. We heard that from Canadians. We also heard that from industry, because it was impeding on, as you say, lack of trust meant that it was much more challenging for good projects to go ahead. And that's exactly what we've done in the proposed legislation, is rebuilding trust. And rebuilding trust means that we have made clear that the views of Canadians will be heard. The views of communities will be heard. There will be no standing test, that if you have concerns, you have your opportunity to make them clear. That we need to be, reconciliation is a top priority for our government, that we need to be working in partnership with Indigenous peoples, and that starts at the very beginning. So that starts in a new early engagement phase, and it goes all the way through monitoring of projects, and that Indigenous traditional knowledge is a must-have, not nice to have. We also, are looking. We've moved from just looking at the environmental factors to a broader impact assessment test, which will look at factors like what the impacts on social impacts, the health impacts, the economic impacts of a project, as well as, of course, the environmental impacts. And we realize that this is actually going to be better. Because when you do this, you will be able to build trust in Canadians that we are making decisions on robust science, that we are listening to communities, that we are working in partnership with Indigenous peoples, but also at the same time making sure that good projects go ahead in a timely way. So we've also, as part of that, looked at how do we ensure that we do more work in the front end, where we will give more certainty to business by looking at how do we work with provinces so that we aren't duplicating efforts and making it more difficult for proponents, but also that they are given guidance about how to consult with Indigenous peoples and the permitting process.
I would just add that this is a different world than it was in 1959 when the National Energy Board was first established. This is a different world even when the first idea of building pipelines were developed by proponents and the process of regulatory review was established a number of years ago. And this bill reflects that changing world. And we believe it reflects it in a way that recognizes and honors the three pillars of responsible economic development in the energy sector. and that is that we want good projects to go through. We understand that the expansion of export markets is a vital Canadian interest. 99% of Canada's exports of oil and gas go to one country, to the United States. We don't think that's healthy in the short term or the long term. So we start looking at what result we want, and we conclude that we want responsible, good projects to go through in a timely way while respecting the environmental realities and our international and domestic obligations and our constitutional and moral obligations to Indigenous peoples. And we think that all three of those pillars and the values that underlie them are reflected in Bill C-69.
Perfect, thank you.
Perfect timing. Before I move to the next, Mr. Fast, I just want to welcome a few people to the committee. Obviously, the two ministers together is fantastic, but what's really nice is that we also have Natural Resources Committee members here as well. We have the chair, which is James Maloney, and we have the vice chair, Shannon Stubbs. It's really nice to see you here. Welcome. We also have Elizabeth May, so welcome too. And for those that aren't normal at the table, I do a little thing up here. We have a yellow card and a red card. I just try to manage a little bit without interrupting people, try to respect people and their time. So when I put up the yellow card, it's meaning that there's just a minute left. When I put up the red card, it means you're out of time. I'd really like you to wrap up. I will butt in if you carry on too much longer than that, but I'm just trying to be respectful, okay? Thank you very much for that, and Mr. Fast.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to both ministers. It's rare that we have two ministers appearing before us at the same time, so very much thank you for that. Minister McKenna, you often say that the environment and the economy go hand in hand. Minister Carr repeated that in his statement as well. I'm looking at Section 22, Sub 1 of the Act, which articulates the factors that must be taken into account. One of those factors is under I, the extent to which the effects of the designated project hinder or contribute to the Government of Canada's ability to meet its environmental obligations and its commitments in respect of climate change, end quote. I think you're well aware that both the Auditor General and the United Nations have highlighted the fact that right now Canada is not on track to meet its greenhouse gas emission targets under the Paris Agreement. And first question to you, Ms. McKenna, is do you acknowledge that that gap presently exists?
Thank you very much to the member. Of course, we need, when we do environmental assessments, need to be making sure that they take into account our environmental obligations, domestic and international, including under the Paris Agreement. Unfortunately, under the previous government, who took no action for 10 years, our emissions went up. First time ever we came up with a climate plan negotiated with provinces and territories and Indigenous peoples where we've taken significant action, phasing out coal, putting a price on pollution, making historic investments in innovation, historic investments in public transportation. Second phase of light rail transit in Canada, in Ottawa, will be the largest greenhouse gas reductions in the country, in the city's history.
Minister,
these measures
the question was very simple. Do you acknowledge that a gap exists between Canada's climate change targets under the Paris Agreement and where we're on track to end up right now?
We have said very clearly that we will meet our 2030 target.
But right now, those agencies, the Auditor General and the United Nations, have both said we're not on track to meet those targets. Would you acknowledge that?
We have taken the measures that were negotiated with provinces and territories. I know the member of opposition, and the opposition party, also agreed that we need to meet our 2030 target. We will meet our 2030 target. That's why we've taken ambitious action. Some of the action has not come into effect. When you phase out coal
I'm
by
gathering
2030,
from your response that your answer is yes, there remains a gap between Canada's commitments and actually where we're tracking. And in fact, that gap is in fact increasing as time goes by.
So we've been very pleased to see our emissions going down. We need to be ambitious. We need to meet our 2030 target, and we are absolutely committed to doing that. And I would certainly hope that the opposition would support the measures that we have brought in place under our climate plan.
Thank you, Minister. Now, I'm going to repeat, you've often said that the economy and the environment go hand in hand. I've gone through Bill C-69 with a fine-tooth comb. It addresses many of the environmental challenges that projects that fall under the ambit of the Act will face. Nowhere is there any reference to economic benefits or anything compelling the agency or the review panel to actually consider the economic benefits for Canada. So despite the rhetoric we hear from you and your government, it appears that, in fact, the economy and the environment don't go together. This legislation, which addresses economic projects that drive prosperity in Canada, this legislation doesn't in any way address the economic benefits that would accrue to Canadians as a result of these projects.
I'd like to thank the member for highlighting the importance of the environment and the economy going together. And actually, for the first time ever, through a sustainability test, we will be looking at the economic benefits of a project. Previously, under the legislation that was brought in by the Conservative government, there was no way to do that. So it was through a press release at the end that you were trying to explain to Canadians the economic benefits. We have made it very clear that a sustainability test means looking at the environmental impacts, but also the social, health, and economic benefits. We think that's critically important, and that was something that we heard loud and clear from proponents.
Minister, the sustainability test is not articulated in Section 22, Sub 1. I've looked through it many times. It's not there. This is a one-sided piece of legislation that focuses on the environment without taking into account the economic benefits. Now, since my time is short, I've got one last question. That is, this is one of the tools you're using to hopefully achieve your targets under Paris. Another tool you're using is the carbon tax. Can you tell us today how much you expect the carbon tax backstop that your government has implemented, how much do you expect that backstop to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Canada?
So just to confirm, it's Section 63 that mentions under the sustainability test the economic impact. So just to clarify, it is very clear there. That putting a price on pollution is part of our climate plan, but we've said it's in Section 63. But we have been very clear that it's up to provinces and territories to determine how they want to put a price on pollution, consistent with what we've said is the benchmark. But provinces and territories have taken action. 80%
the benchmark
of Canadians,
you refer to is $50 per ton. It's my understanding that we will not be reducing our greenhouse gas emissions under that tax.
Ed, you're out of time, and so I just need to bring that to your attention. Thank you very much. Sorry about to cut you off, but we got time constraints. I did forget the last time around to introduce one more member at the table, Kim Rudd, the Parliamentary Secretary to Minister Carr. Last but not least. Sorry to have missed you on the last round there. Okay, Ms. Duncan?
Thank you. Thank you to both the ministers and your officials. And I think that you know that we're hoping that we can at least have your officials at the tail end of the review, possibly the ministers, so that you can respond to some of the recommendations made by the witnesses that come before us, which we think will be useful. So it's good to hear from you at the outset, but it'll be good to hear from you at the end. What do you think about what Canadians are asking for? Mr. Carr, my first question is for you. Why is it the CER appointees to panels are not required to consider climate commitments or cumulative impacts?
The legislation, I think, is clear on what is to be considered.
And they are not included?
All designated or major projects regulated by the Canadian Energy Regulator will be subject to an impact assessment.
Panels?
Yeah, study to an impact assessment.
Commissioners can be appointed.
Proposed by the Canadian Energy Regulator will be subject to an impact assessment. So Canada's climate change commitments will be considered in the impact assessment of major pipeline and energy transmission projects.
I won't belabor it. Yes, the panel will consider, but not the CER appointee. So you might want to revisit the legislation. That might be something that you might want to revisit.
Okay.
How do you respond to concerns, and both ministers might want to speak to this, The expert panel appointed by the government recommended, having heard from anyone across Canada, a permanent quasi-judicial tribunal. Why was the decision made to simply have ad hoc panels of people appointed each time there's a project?
Thank you very much for the question. So we've taken a very different approach than the previous government. We've been very clear about the factors that must be considered. We've been clear that there will be one agency that will be leading the assessment, but at the end of the day, it's up to elected representatives to make decisions on projects that are worth billions of dollars. In fact, in the next 10 years, it's estimated the projects will be worth $500 billion.
With all due respect, Madam Minister, that's not my question. The question you're answering is if the panel will have a decision-making or recommending. My question is why you decided to have ad hoc panels as opposed to a standalone, full-time, permanent quasi-judicial panel that would have expertise.
I'm happy to turn this over to my deputy to answer in more detail. That we are going to look at the best, most qualified people for a particular panel, and we've been clear about the requirements for the panel, that there needs to be, people need to have experience, to have expertise in Indigenous issues. But I will ask my deputy, or I will ask Ron Hallman, the president of the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The benefit of having a wider range of potential members on a roster is that the breadth of the types of projects that the agency undertakes assessment of are much wider than what the typical life cycle regulator would look at. We look at dams, we look at mines, we look at roads, we look at railways, etc. And so it's useful to have a roster of experts in a wide range of things that can be brought together for a specific project at a specific time within a range of circumstances, Indigenous realities, community realities, etc. And that's the system that we have at this time.
Okay, thank you. The Minister of Environment repeated many times when she spoke at second reading on the bill of the importance of public participation in the review of these major projects, and how important it was that this legislation would resolve the lack of faith in the current NEB process, where clearly there was great consternation because people were being denied the right to provide evidence or to cross-examine. Why is it then that this legislation is vacuous on actually prescribing specific rights? It simply says there'll be a right to participate. It doesn't say whether that will include the right to table evidence or to cross-examine, and it simply leaves it to the agency to decide from time to time when someone can participate, when they can't, what they'll be allowed to do, what they can't do.
Under the previous government, there was a standing test when it came to the National Energy Board. That has been removed. We have heard loud and clear that Canadians want the right to participate, and they should. We certainly believe that we need to hear from communities, because that'll help us make the best decision possible. And that's the principle we will be following. The Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency does a very good job right now of reaching out and hearing from communities and for Canadians across the board. And we think that's the approach that we should take, that under the previous government, that people were shut down, they were prevented from testifying, they were prevented from expressing their views, and we think that is a wrong-headed approach.
With all due respect, this legislation does not change that situation. What it is also silent on is whether costs will be available. I have a lot of experience in participating in energy reviews. The only way that the community and Indigenous peoples can participate is to be fully allocated costs and cost advances. We see nothing in the budget, and there's nothing specifically prescribed that costs will be available to everyone who wishes to participate.
So we've been very clear that we will be providing support for communities and for Indigenous peoples to participate. We've increased it significantly, and this consultation will start at the very beginning. It'll start in an early engagement phase that we think is critically important to hear those voices from community members and also from Indigenous peoples.
Thank you. Right on the button. Okay, Mr. Maloney.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the invitation and including not just myself, but the Parliamentary Secretary for being part of this committee. As Minister Carr mentioned, it's not just the two ministries that work together, it's the two committees that work together, and I think that's a strong statement. I, for one, think that this bill is a reflection that the economy and the environment do go hand in hand. Now, in my capacity as chair of the committee, I've had, over the past 2 years, opportunity to meet with stakeholders on a regular basis. And we heard today the word trust and certainty, but one of the issues that comes up on a regular basis is the word confidence. And when speaking with stakeholders from across the country, they have expressed to me that there has been some concern about confidence with respect to investing in Canada because of the process that has been in place for the last number of decades, frankly. So my question to both ministers is, how do you see this piece of legislation changing that and restoring confidence to stakeholders so that we can move forward with all of the large energy projects that are in the system?
Well, let me start by agreeing with the premise. And the major objective of this legislation is to find the balance between investor certainty, predictability, environmental stewardship, and Indigenous partnership and participation. And we think that we have met that balance. And in my conversations, as recently as a few weeks ago in Houston, when the energy world was gathered to talk about these issues, to talk about competitiveness, and in all of my conversations to talk about Canada, we have an awful lot going for us in this country. But it's important to underline the fundamental issues of predictability and certainty among investors when they look at decisions that can be made virtually all over the world. Canada has to be able to make the argument convincingly that the set of conditions that are in place in our country are favorable against any other country that may be competing for international business. And we believe that this legislation will enhance our competitiveness because of the importance we are putting on certainty and predictability.
I can just add to that. So we spent a lot of time hearing from industry about the need for certainty, but I think everyone agrees on the need for certainty. So through early engagement, we will be having outputs that industry is very happy to see. So we will be working with provinces to have one project, one review. So that means that we will eliminate the duplication that is burdensome for industry and also takes additional time. We can align our timelines with provinces. We will also help them understand the consultation that's needed with Indigenous communities. They've asked for support in that regard, and also the permitting process. They want to understand, okay, what is the permitting process? And so we think that this is actually going a long way to responding to exactly what industry said. They said, tell us what we need to do. And that was not available under the previous system, and we think that this will actually make our system much more attractive to business, provide the certainty that's needed, ensure we're protecting the environment, but also ensure that good projects go ahead in a timely way.
And make sure that all of that is done at the front end of the project. And that's why you'll see that there is a front end load of information and of certainty, so that the proponents know exactly what's expected of them as they move through the process, so that there are no surprises. Certainty, predictability, no surprises.
Thank you. I have a small amount of time left. There are a number of projects that are currently pending before the National Energy Board. Can you tell us what's going to become of those projects and how this is going to change when the new legislation comes into effect?
All projects that are currently under review will be reviewed under the National Energy Board. We're expecting that this legislation will be ratified by Parliament sometime in 2019. So it will be as is until the legislation is proclaimed. Even after the legislation is proclaimed, those projects that began under the current system will remain under the current system unless the proponent makes the choice to move to the new one. And that would be a decision that the proponent would make.
Thank you. Okay,
1 minute.
If you can answer this question in 1 minute, I'm not sure you can. but I'll let you try. How would you describe what's the biggest difference between the new National Energy Regulator and the National Energy Board right now?
First of all, it has a modernized governance structure, which is very important to split the functions that were combined. There will be, by legislation, the necessity of appointing an Indigenous person as one of the commissioners. That's a difference. One out of the 7 statutorily will be required. And it will be active in one project, one assessment with the impact agency, and will also work with the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and the offshore boards. They will be working with the impact assessment agency. So we think that we have streamlined the process. We have been very specific about the governance structure that would lead to more expeditious decision-making, more accountability, more transparency for Canadians.
Right on the button. Okay, Mr. Sopak.
I'd like to correct the minister here, correct the record. She made a statement that was incorrect. Under our government from 2005 to 2015, emissions went down from 738 megatons to 722. So I wish you would use the correct facts when she makes statements like that, while at the same time under our government, most environmental indicators in this country improved. I should advise the minister that if you're talking about the environment, using numbers is what actually counts. I have a very specific question regarding the $50 carbon tax. How much will Canada's emissions, and I want a number here, how much will Canada's emissions be reduced under a $50 a ton carbon tax?
Well, thank you very much. I would like to say that a large part of the emissions that went down in Ontario is because of the coal phase-out. So a shout-out to the Government of Ontario for taking action that improved health and also built a cleaner environment. As I said, it's important to understand that putting a price on pollution is part of our broader climate plan. We believe in numbers, so we spend a lot of time modeling. We also worked closely with provinces and territories. And with each province and territory, each province and territory is different, and they are taking, they are the ones who are implementing the system that's consistent with our benchmark. And as I say, 80% of Canadians live in a jurisdiction where there's price on pollution.
What is the number of the reduction?
And the good news is that all the jurisdictions that have a price on pollution, the 4 provinces, Alberta, BC, Ontario, and Quebec, are the fastest growing provinces in the country. So it's great to see that you can put a price on what you don't want pollution so you can grow your economy.
Quite clearly, the minister is simply unable to provide a number, which is clearly ridiculous. When I ran the environmental program at a paper mill, we installed a wastewater treatment plant, and we knew exactly how water quality would improve because of the installation of that plant. So what you're telling Canadians here, they will be asked to pay a $50 carbon tax, probably increasing over time, and there is absolutely no measurement of what the environmental effect will be. That's basically what I'm hearing. Okay, and that's fine. I would like to now address the issue of competitiveness. And what I heard from both ministers is simply beyond belief in terms of how this will help Canada's competitiveness. It will help destroy it. In fact, my first job as a young fisheries biologist was doing pipeline assessments in the Mackenzie Valley, and 25 years of process on that potential project killed that project. And now we have impoverished communities all along the Mackenzie Valley because that pipeline was not built. Bad process kills projects. So, for example, on February 9th, 2018, Steve Williams, the CEO of Suncor, said, Suncor to shun major new projects amid Canada's difficult regulatory environment. One of Canada's major oil companies, we're not investing here anymore. I have a paper here. Pipeline shortage to cost the economy $15.6 billion this year. Maybe you wouldn't run into so many deficits in your budgeting if you allowed the economy to actually proceed and create income. In terms of the legal review of Bill C-69, the Legal Daily publication, the headline reads, Bill C-69 aims to expand and speed federal reviews, but lawyers doubt process will be faster or cheaper. So quite clearly, what your government is doing is severely constraining the development of Canada's natural resource industries. And you're reaping the remnants of the good governance under Stephen Harper, but that will quickly dissipate. How will you ensure investors, with a process like this, why do you think someone like Steve Williams has decided to shun Canada in terms of investing?
Bad process kills projects. I agree. That's what happened under the previous government.
Nonsense.
That projects did not go ahead.
Nonsense.
The government ended up losing in court a number of times because the duty to consult was not met. That unfortunately, that when you don't have a system that listens to people, that you don't make decisions based on robust science, that you don't meet your constitutional obligations as Minister Carr said, your moral obligations to Indigenous peoples, you can't get good projects built. Under our government, we have approved major projects. And we have a system here that will provide the certainty that business is expecting. It will create a world-class system. And in terms of the timelines, and we heard loudly and clearly that we need to have clear timelines, that we've reduced the timelines for
I only have
impact
a little bit of
assessment.
time, and to refute your argument, the Northern Gateway Pipeline passed with flying colors through a proper regulatory process with some 238 conditions. The Prime Minister arbitrarily killed that project for political purposes. And we had community after community all along that proposed pipeline route that were devastated by that political decision by the Prime Minister after a sound and rigorous environmental review process.
Madam Chair, I would not want to refute my fellow Manitoban, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to. It was the Federal Court of Appeal who quashed Northern Gateway, not because of insufficient consultation from the proponent, not because of insufficient consultation from the regulator, but insufficient consultation from the Harper government. And that is why we changed the process for Trans Mountain, because any sensible person would look at failure and say, we don't want to repeat it.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Amos.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses, including the civil servants who work so hard to support our ministers. I think your appearance here really is actually an important aspect of our democracy. I note that because when the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act of 2012, which was a gutting of the previous environmental assessment regime, when that act was passed, I seem to recall that neither the Conservative Environment Minister nor the Natural Resources Minister appeared before any committee to discuss this issue. So thank you for being here. I would like to start by going into the issue of scientific integrity and the issue of the role of science in impact assessment. I think Canadians view this as being really important. The expert panel on environmental assessment processes concluded, and I'll quote them, that stronger guidelines and standards are needed to ensure that impact assessment processes include rigorous scientific methods. So clearly science was a focus of the expert panel. However, in Section 22 of the Act, there are a number of factors that are set out that are required to be considered in the context of conducting impact assessment, and they include things like sustainability, traditional knowledge of Indigenous peoples, etc. But science-based evidence isn't included as a factor. So I'm wondering if this is an oversight, and I'm wondering if it was, if there is not an intention to ensure that science is incorporated into the factors that are considered.
Thank you very much. So we certainly agree that making sure that you make decisions based on robust science, evidence, and Indigenous traditional knowledge is key, and that has to be throughout. So we've talked about the new sustainability, looking at the sustainability and all the factors. That would be throughout. You would be considering the science throughout that. That government scientists will also be very engaged, that they would review any studies provided by companies. When there's public concern, there would be independent scientific reviews that would be done. That Indigenous traditional knowledge, as I mentioned, is a must-have, not a nice-to-have. That we are going to be making sure that the science is put out in a transparent way, that we believe that transparency is extremely important in making sure that folks can see what are the basis for decisions. So there's going to be a new online open science and data platform. As you know, under our government, we brought in a new chief science advisor. That chief science advisor is tasked with reviewing the methods and integrity of the science of the decisions, and we think that this brings a lot more rigor to how we will be making decisions and making sure that we are using robust science.
And just to add, that's also true for the Canadian Energy Regulator. It says specifically in the bill that the Commission will have to look at scientific information and data, so it's explicit.
Thank you. I'd like to shift to the issue of strategic and regional impact assessments. As you're aware, the expert panel indicated the importance of these, specifically quoted that that regional impact assessment is too important to long-term federal interests to be triggered on an ad hoc basis. Previous federal environmental assessment rules have provided for this kind of regional and also strategic impact assessment, but they've rarely been conducted. And my own view is that as we talk about environment and the economy going hand in hand, both of these regional and strategic impact assessment aspects are crucial to ensure that the economic aspect doesn't get the upper hand, if you will. So I wonder why the legislation or the proposed legislation leaves strategic impact assessment and regional impact assessment to entirely to discretion. And I wonder if there's not a way to put a better frame around it and to more firmly ensure that such assessments will occur. The suggestions have been made that there be an independent body created to carry these out. So I just wonder if you could speak to that theme, please.
Thank you very much. So we heard loud and clear, not just from the expert panel, but actually it was across the board. So it was proponents, it was Indigenous peoples, it was environmentalists, it was provinces and territories that we needed to use the tool of strategic and regional assessments. Why? Because one project can't bear like every other project that, or all the cumulative impacts, because you were trying to bring in much broader issues into one project assessment. It just doesn't work that way, nor does it provide certainty. So we certainly agree, but it's key to understand that you must do regional or strategic assessments with provinces. That there is provincial jurisdiction. We certainly recognize that as a federal government, and that we need to be working with provinces and territories. We have announced that we will be conducting the first strategic assessment on climate change. We've been very clear that we need to meet our international obligations, and so that we are going to be starting with that. It's going to be launched in the coming weeks with a consultation paper, and this will be requiring close collaboration with provinces and territories, obviously, but also with Indigenous peoples and other stakeholders.
And just to add, there also will be regional assessments in the offshore, and the continuing role of the Newfoundland Labrador Offshore Board and the Nova Scotia Offshore Board will include those assessments.
Thank you.
I think my deputy just wanted to add, a very useful point.
As the Minister indicated, there's a critical role in collaborating with provinces and territories on identifying key ecosystems and their values and working collaboratively on regional and strategic assessments. But the Act also provides for a means for people to request consideration of a regional and strategic assessment, and the Minister to respond publicly with the reasons for the decision.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next up, Mr. Gaudin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Pouvez-vous m'aviser?
Thank you. Could you advise me 1 minute before the yellow card is really important because I'm sharing my time with my colleague here. And Mr. Minister, Madam Minister, and officials, thank you for being here this morning. I was very pleased to hear the Minister of Natural Resources say that he was pleased to sit down with the Minister of the Environment, and I am completely in agreement with this attitude. Now, we also have to work collaboratively and have concrete results. Madam Minister of the Environment, you spoke in your presentation of the bill. You said there were objectives to allow scientific data to be considered, that interests and opinions of Indigenous peoples would be part of it, that people would be consulted, people who wanted to provide information during the process would be able to do so. So I'm going to preach by example. I did a consultation in my riding of Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier, and I sent you the information received. Now, it's difficult for me to understand the coherence in this process because at the House of Commons, at the Parliament, during the second reading, there was a time attribution. So you want to consult, you want to please everyone, but in reality, you are trying to limit us, the parliamentarians, to participate in the debate. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this paradox that is quite striking. Thank you. To my colleague, I'm going to try to answer in French. I always try to do that. It's important for me. And thank you for having done a consultation in your riding. I know that there's a great interest in Quebec. So, of course, we do have to consult. We have had consultation throughout this journey, and the journey began early on. We announced the principles early on. Then we had a consultation. We had a panel of experts that consulted with Canadians. We all, well, 4 ministers are directly responsible. Madam Minister, with all due respect, I'm quite limited in time, and I'd like to hear you on the paradox on this consultation and this illusion of saying we're going to consult with everyone, but we, the parliamentarians, we were shut out. Well, I'm quite pleased to be here and to speak with you, and there is a committee process, and I know that there were consultations. You will have consultations not only with ministers, but also, I'm sure, with members of industry, with Indigenous peoples, environmentalists, with Canadians. So I truly believe in a robust and strong consultation process, and that's what we've done. Yes, I understand that, Madam Minister, but you seem to agree with your government on the fact that we, the parliamentarians, were shut out. So, yes, we believe that it's very important to hear Canadians, and that is why... here's another question. My colleague, I'd like to hear about the impact of the carbon tax for the reduction of greenhouse gases. Are you able to provide us with a figure? Now, as I was saying, we're talking about a price on pollution because that's what it is. That's the price of what we don't want, pollution. And we have to work with the provinces and territories. With our program, there is a... Madam Minister, yes, we have told each province and territory there has to be a price on pollution, there has to be a system. Madam Minister, once again, with all due respect, I have a lot of respect for you. I appreciate the work that you're doing, but I understand that you don't have a figure. So next question. 2 minutes? There's 2 minutes? Okay. Well, quickly, the Minister of Natural Resources. Still in the same train of thought with regards to transparency, consultation, the implementation of measures to be more efficient. You believe that by changing this and by creating a new structure, by creating a regulator, by making the process more onerous, you believe that this will improve things? I'd like to hear what you have to say on the relevance of the creation of the Canadian Energy Regulator. When there are organizations that exist, we could improve what already exists rather than creating a new regulatory agency.
And it's less complex and it's less layered. And it's also true in the legislative timelines. So in the case of major projects, 365 days moves to 300 days, less than 1 year. And in the case of CER non-designated projects, it moves down from 450...
Monsieur le ministre, je vous arrête tout de suite. Je veux pas avoir le processus parce qu'on...
Well, I don't want to hear all about the process because we'll argue on that. When do we begin calculating on the calendar? And if we look at the entire process, I'm not sure that there's a gain with regard to the process and the bill that has been tabled. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to give the floor to my colleague.
Thank you, ministers and officials, for being here. Minister McKenna, I have a question for you. As you know, and as I'm sure we can all agree, we all believe in Canadians' right to peaceful assembly. But the BC Supreme Court recently established a buffer on the construction of the Trans Mountain Pipeline and has made it clear that protesters must not obstruct the expansion. On Monday, 4 RCMP officers were physically injured by illegal protesters at the site, including one who was kicked in the head, sustained a head injury and then two other injuries in officers. I just wonder if you will clearly, for Canadians, as a leader, condemn the violence against RCMP officers by those illegal protesters at the Trans Mountain site.
So we heard from the Minister of Public Safety in the House. Of course, we have...
Yeah, I'm asking you. So that, I guess if you're prepared to condemn it, I guess the answer would be yes, which you could do quickly.
But I'm going to give the Minister a
So no.
very quick answer.
So we certainly support the hardworking RCMP officers in doing a very tough job.
Okay, thank you. We're out of time. Next up, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, ministers, for being here today. The 7 Liberal MPs from Newfoundland and Labrador, and indeed everyone from our province, complained before, during, and following the 2015 election that Harper's CEA 2012 legislation had ignored our offshore oil industry, and that the role of the CNLOPB as a life cycle regulator for our industry. So can you explain to the committee how this legislation will restore the faith of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians in the offshore exploration regulatory regime?
Well, I'd like to thank the member for the question and to let him know how much I am enjoying my visits to Newfoundland and Labrador, including visits to describe the process that led to this legislation, including very important meetings with the industry and others, including an assessment of the offshore board and the contribution that it has made over the many years that it has been in operation, and to learn from the advice given to us during the consultation process, which led us to the conclusion that the offshore boards had lots of expertise that should be considered as an important part of environmental impact assessments, and they will be. According to this legislation. We respect the accords. We understand how important they are to Newfoundland and Labrador and to Nova Scotia. So we consulted, we heard the advice. That advice can be seen in this legislation, and that advice will be seen as we roll out the implementation of this bill.
Thank you. Minister, I guess a very similar question, but just another point. As you said, you were recently in St. John's and speaking to industry leaders in the offshore oil and gas. And the feedback you received from the MPs and stakeholders, of course, that all result in any provisions in the legislation to address your ministry's obligations under the Atlantic Accord.
We understand and recognize in the legislation the formal role for the offshore boards and the expertise that's contained within them. We honor that expertise, we recognize it, and we embed it in the legislation. And also there is the possibility down the road that there will be additional responsibilities for the boards if there would be renewable energy generated in the offshore, and if it's necessary to amend the accords with the cooperation and with the leadership of Newfoundland and Labrador, we would be pleased to consider that.
I might just add that it was very useful hearing from the members of Parliament from Newfoundland and Labrador, express strong views. And one of the things that we believe is an opportunity is through the project list. So we are doing consultations on the project list of avoiding the need for a separate impact assessment for offshore exploratory drilling activities where a regional assessment has been carried out. We think that that's something that we heard, that was an opportunity to be more efficient, not reinvent the wheel every time. And that was in direct response from from having good discussions with industry in Newfoundland and Labrador, the government, and also our members of Parliament. So thank you.
You got 2 more minutes.
Thank you, Madam Minister. That's the questions I had. That's fine. Pass time to some others.
Does anybody else have questions over there? Did you got 2 minutes? No? Go ahead.
Actually, I'll take some of that. So, ministers, thank you very much for being here. I guess we're this afternoon now. Very much appreciated. Having gone through provincial terms of reference and environmental assessment process multiple times, How does C69 ensure that the IA process is not just one of checking off boxes? Consulted with Indigenous groups, check. Consulted with local residents, check. Receive technical briefs from opponents, check. It's, at the end of the day, none of the consultation briefs were, in my experience, were taken seriously or considered. Or reflected in the final project deciding or design or alternatives. How does C69 ensure that all public input is considered, reflected, or acted upon? Does Bill C69 ensure that the IA process is not simply a checkbox routine?
Thank you very much, and I totally agree with you. It can't just be about checking a box but not doing a serious job. So there are a number of measures that we think are extraordinarily important. We talked about the expansion of public participation, and that's going to be from the very start, from the early engagement phase, the partnership with Indigenous peoples. The transparency is critically important throughout the system, but especially when you make the decisions, because you'll have to actually show how did you reflect the factors and what did you hear and how does that play out in the decision that you made. Also in the monitoring and following up, making sure communities, if there are conditions associated with a project, that communities, Indigenous peoples, that have confidence that there is monitoring of the conditions and that there is follow-up and enforcement of the conditions.
I think you're good. Okay. You're down. Okay. Ms. Duncan? You've got 3 minutes.
I have one very quick question for the Minister of Environment. Will this committee and the public receive the project list before our review of C69 completes and before third reading proceeds?
Thank you very much. So the project list is currently out for consultations. There's certainly a lot of interest in the project list. And we're consulting, sorry,
just
I should be clear.
A yes or no,
we're
because I have a second
consulting
question.
on the criteria for the project list, and we believe that it's important to have a final project list, ideally at the same time when you introduce legislation, when you have final legislation passing, sorry.
I don't hear a yes or a no on that. That's a little discouraging. We have a dilemma here to both of the ministers. I know the government wants to fast-track this bill. We had closure on debate in second reading. We're anticipating we'll have that in third reading as well. And there's a lot of stress on this committee to limit who can come forward. I've heard the minister over and over, both ministers, saying it's important that everybody have their say. Who would you suggest that we not invite to testify before us from the First Nation communities?
So I certainly have great confidence in this committee. I have great confidence in the chair that you will make decisions about who you should be consulting with. We are also meeting on a regular basis with Indigenous, with the national Indigenous organizations. We've made that commitment to them. So we think it is very important that you hear from the people that you believe have the expertise and can support the committee's work.
Time. You have 1 more minute.
I'd still like an answer to my first question so that we know if we have any substance to our review. There's no substance to this act until we know the project list. Will it include in situ? Will it include dangerous rail cargo?
But I mean, I think that it's critically important that we hear, back to your point about consultations, that you want to hear from folks about the criteria for the project list. That is exactly why we are consulting on the criteria for the project list right now, and we know there's a lot of interest in that, and we're very interested in seeing, hearing what, getting the report back on what people have said.
So we don't know if we will have the list or not.
I mean, the plan is to have. Sorry, I'll pass this over to Ron Hallman from the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency.
Thank you, Chair. So right now, as the Minister indicated, we're consulting on criteria for the types of activities that would go on the project list, and we anticipate after we receive the input that we're getting that we would have a proposed list for further public consultation very early in the fall.
Okay. I might just add that this is very different from the previous government where there was absolutely no consultations. It was a political decision about the project list.
Thank you very much. That was perfect timing. The ministers very graciously have given us 2 full hours of their time to be with us at committee for questioning, so we have an opportunity for one more round. So I did get names, so we'll start on that third round. It's a full round, which is about half an hour. Okay. So we have Mr. Sopak sharing with Ms. Stubbs.
Thanks. That last sentence was complete nonsense, Minister. I find it amazing, and this is directed to officials. So under a the proposed $50 per ton carbon tax, has there been a report written, an analysis done that shows what the reduction in CO2 emissions from Canada would be under a $50 carbon tax?
So we have done modeling that when you look at the climate plan that was negotiated with the provinces and territories, we have looked at all the measures and how they work together so that we have a plan that will
give us a number.
To our target.
I'm asking for a number.
I will pass it over to my deputy, Stephen Lucas.
And this is a very fair question, because whenever you do an environmental action, there should be an environmental outcome. You put a scrubber on a smokestack, SO2 goes down. You plant grass on fragile land, soil erosion goes down. You get very specific results from environmental actions, but it's quite clear that under the $50 carbon tax that this government is proposing, this government has absolutely no idea what the reduction in emissions will be. And I think how much time have I used?
You've used a minute.
Okay. So if you could respond to that.
As the minister indicated, the modeling that we do through a transparent process with provinces and consulting with expert groups, and we provide in our annual reports that are public and in reports to the United Nations, includes carbon pricing. It includes the carbon pricing that British Columbia put in place many years ago and that other jurisdictions have. There's interactive effects with other measures, but the recent report provided to the United Nations in December 2017, which showed the single biggest drop in emissions since we've been reporting, includes the effects of carbon pricing in those jurisdictions that have those plans to contribute towards meeting our target in 2030.
Yes, I've heard this answer before. In fact, I saw it on the show Yes, Minister, when Sir Humphrey was in front of a committee. So thank you for that very opaque answer. And again, I make the point, Canadians are being asked to pony up money for a carbon tax, and this government has absolutely no idea what the effect will be and will not provide any numbers to back it up. I'm now turned my time over to Ms. Stubbs.
Thank you. And clearly, the carbon tax buying social license is baloney, since Alberta was the first jurisdiction in all of North America more than a decade ago to regulate, set targets for reductions of emissions, and implement a carbon levy on major industrial emitters. And we still face significant opposition to energy development in Alberta and the construction of pipelines. But I must revisit this issue with the Minister of Environment. It's very concerning. So I just, since I ran to the end last time, I just want to give you another opportunity to clearly condemn the violent actions of the illegal protesters at Burnaby on Monday, having injured those RCMP officers just there to do their jobs.
So, as I said, we support our RCMP officers.
Do you
and
condemn
we
the violence of the protesters against the RCMP officers?
That we always support our RCMP officers and the actions they take. They work in very difficult circumstances, and the Minister of Public Safety has been very clear on that.
I'm asking you if you condemn the violence.
That we have.
I'm not worried about the Minister of Natural Resources, because he said he'd bring in the military. So I have a feeling about a year ago to get this thing built. So I think the concern is that you refuse to condemn the violent actions of illegal protesters and anti-energy activists for votes, because you want to keep that soft, NDP, left, and anti-energy activists, a coalition of voters in British Columbia. And so it is very concerning as a senior minister speaking on behalf of the government that you will not condemn illegal, violent, physical attacks on RCMP officers. I think the answer is just clearly yes, you condemn it.
So violence is never appropriate. But to your broader point, I've been 100% clear that we approved the Kinder Morgan pipeline. That we went through.
I think that goes without saying.
But
Do
no,
you
just
condemn the
said
violent?
that we were. You said that we were trying to appeal to voters that might not support the project. I certainly have been very 100% clear that that project went through a robust
review. So just as clearly condemn the violent attacks
that we
against
always
RCMP
condemn
officers
that
by illegal protesters in Burnaby.
Sorry, I will be clear. Violence is never appropriate. That people have the right to free expression.
So specifically for the RCMP officers that were injured on Monday, do you condemn the violent attacks by those illegal protesters on those RCMP officers?
As I said, violence is never appropriate. That we have the rule of law in our country, and I don't know how much more can be clear.
I think the way you can be more clear is just to say, yes, you condemn those violent acts.
Violent acts are never appropriate, so any acts of violence against our safety officers
about what occurred on Monday
or any
Point of
other
order, Madam
is
Chair.
not appropriate.
Point of order. Member Stubbs is badgering of the witness. This is inappropriate and
I
unparliamentary.
do believe that you're repeating the same
Dad, but I'm just
question,
asking for
and you're not giving
for
a
an
chance
answer.
for an answer. So let's give her a chance.
Very feminist. Am I out of time? Okay, well, I'll give you one more chance, just to be clear, that you condemn the violent actions of illegal protesters
condemn
who injured RCMP officers on Monday.
I condemn violent acts of any sort against RCMP officers. With particular incidents, it's up to the Minister of Public Safety to comment, but I certainly condemn violent acts, yes.
Okay. All right. I'm going to move on to Mr. Basio.
Thank you, Minister, for your patience and your decorum that you've exhibited here today. We appreciate it. Your mandate is to restore public trust in the environmental assessments, provide meaningful public participation, ensure that decisions are based on science and advance reconciliation through nation-to-nation cooperation with Indigenous peoples. So my questions, I'm going to have a group of questions, are therefore aimed at determining whether or to what extent those goals are actually satisfied in Bill C-69 and whether further amendments are going to be needed. So first question, why are the 5 public interest factors for ministerial cabinet decisions, which is Section 63, merely considerations? For accountability purposes, why are they not the mandatory basis for decision making?
So thank you very much to the member. So those factors are mandatory. That the legislation spells out clearly that they must be considered for decision making. And so those factors, just to be clear, the project's contribution to sustainability, the impacts on Indigenous peoples and their rights, adverse effects and mitigation measures that are in place to reduce the project's impacts, and also Canada's ability to meet its environmental obligations and climate change commitments. We think that these are critically important, and also important is, as we've mentioned repeatedly, is transparency. So when we make a decision, a decision will have to clearly set out on what basis the decision was made, and you will need to show that you've considered these factors.
But you consider that a legally enforceable approval test?
Well, I mean, it says that they are mandatory for decision making. I mean, ultimately, the Minister or Cabinet has to make a decision about a designated project. While those are factors that might be considered, there's not a magic formula in how you weight these things. You need to take into account all of these factors when you make a public interest decision. And it will be made in a transparent way with the reasons posted. This is a new step that did not occur under the previous government. There was no transparency in terms of how decisions were made, and that really eroded public trust. So we believe that it's important that you have clear factors and that you also need to explain to Canadians how you made a decision about a particular project.
Thank you. What does contributes to sustainability actually mean? Once again, Section 63, and precisely how will this be determined or evaluated by the Minister or Cabinet?
Thank you very much. And so sustainability was something that was very important. We heard that from Canadians. We heard that from environmentalists. And this is really about sustainability in the long term. So how you can protect the environment, how you can contribute to social and economic well-being of Canadians, how you can preserve health in a manner that benefits present and in future generations, So that's how you would look at sustainability. We've also been clear that there needs to be a gender-based plus analysis as part of this, and we think that that gets you to better decisions.
Will the government be proposing to include all high-carbon projects on the project list?
So as we've said, we're absolutely committed to our domestic and international obligations, including with respect to climate change. And we have announced that we will be doing a strategic assessment when it comes to climate change. In terms of the project list, so we are consulting on the criteria for the project list. We believe that it should consider a environmental threshold, including greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, and I think if I heard you correctly earlier, and maybe just to verify this, you'd said that the project list would be a part of the final legislation.
So it's a regulation, but we do believe that the timing of the project list ideally would coincide with the legislation.
Okay. In the absence of mandatory strategic regional assessments, precisely how will the Act effectively address the cumulative effects of multiple small projects, including projects on federal lands?
Well, thank you very much. Once again, we really believe in the importance of regional strategic assessments. When you look at cumulative effects, it's not one project. It's often multiple projects that have had an impact. So we will be looking at conducting these strategic and regional assessments. In terms of federal projects on federal lands, the same tests will apply. We think that you need to be robust. And then there's also, once again, the project list where a project could fall under the project list once it meets the criteria.
Excellent. Thank you, Minister.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Turning it over to Mr. Fast.
Thank you very much, and both ministers, I want to thank you again for being here, because I've been in that seat before, and it's sometimes not a pleasant place to be. And I found that it's sometimes easier simply to answer the questions. If it's a yes or no question, you either say yes or no, and then the committee has the answer it needs, or that it has asked. On 5 occasions now, Minister McKenna, you've been asked, do you know how much your national carbon tax backstop will reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And we still haven't got an answer. I know you've found ways around the question, but we really need to know. Do you and those in your department know how much that carbon tax will actually reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in Canada?
So
yes
once again, we have provinces that already have a price on pollution. So you can look at British Columbia. It has a price on pollution. The prices are not the same right now. At the end, we have said that it's a $50 price by 2022. Some provinces have cap and trade systems, but our focus is on how do we meet our 2030 target, and how does carbon pricing fit in with the overarching
plan? And I believe
plan?
Our questions were specifically on a $50 per ton price on carbon, and whether you or your officials know what impact that will have on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We're going to keep asking that question because you're not answering it.
Maybe my deputy can do a better job in being clear, because I'm trying to be clear, but I will pass it on to my deputy.
Forgive me. So as I noted, over the past decade or more, through our reporting to United Nations and our alternate year reporting to Canadians on emissions, that includes our modeling. That modeling includes all measures that have been undertaken and implemented by the Government of Canada or provinces and territories, including carbon pricing in provinces such as British Columbia going back a decade.
So if there were a $50 per ton carbon price across Canada consistently, each province and territory, what kinds of greenhouse gas emission reductions would we achieve as a country?
I don't have that number offhand. As I noted, it's built into the modeling along with other measures such as
I'm not mixing it with other measures. This is one tool. Before we implement tools in government, I think we like to make those decisions based on evidence, on science. And I'm not hearing that. Now, you've said that you don't have that figure available. Could you provide it to our committee?
We've been transparent on our modeling and the assumptions that underline it. The contributions of both measures in place and planned measures. So I think we will.
Mr. Lucas, I'm glad to have you at committee. You know, we've known each other for quite a while, but that answer isn't going to provide any assurances to Canadians that this Liberal government knows what it's doing on the climate front. Because there are no answers. We've asked, listen, yes or no, do you know what these carbon taxes are going to do to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions? And we've still had no answers. It's very disappointing. I did want to have one last question, Madam Chair, and that's to Minister McKenna. Earlier, I'd asked you about the economy and the environment going hand in hand, which is something you've said regularly, something Minister Carr has said regularly. But there is nothing in this legislation that actually addresses, at the review panel stage or at the agency stage, the economic benefits that will accrue to Canadians. Section 63 that you referred to actually refers specifically to the minister's decision, and that she has to take into account sustainability writ large. But in fact, there's nothing that compels the review agencies, either the review panel or the agency itself, to take into account the economic benefits that will accrue to Canadians as a result of a project being approved. So I'm asking you, where in this whole process, which is supposed to be about the economy and the environment going hand in hand, where are the economic benefits going to be considered, if not at the agency or review panel stage?
So I'd just like to correct that actually the sustainability test does require looking at the positive and negative impacts, including economic, environmental, social, and health. And this is different from the previous government. Under the legislation that the previous government that you were part of brought in, there was no consideration of the economic impacts. But I can, I'll ask the president of the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency.
Where in the legislation do we see the agency or the review panel being charged with taking into account the economic benefits to Canadians?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the previous act, or the current act, what we looked at were adverse environmental effects, period. In the proposed legislation, several new factors have been added. I won't list them all. However, one of them that speaks to the sustainability focus is that we will be required to look at environmental, health, social, and economic effects, and to assess both the positive and negative effects in each of those areas. That work will translate into tailored impact statement guidelines for the proponent to provide. And we've heard from proponents before, why are you guys just picking on the environmental stuff? There's a lot negative stuff. There's a lot of good benefits coming here in all of these areas. And so what this proposes is this will be required up front. It will be in the public impact statement that the proponent files, and it will be commented on and challenged and see the light of day through the public process that the agency will lead and report on prior to providing advice to the minister.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was a thorough answer. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, ministers, for being here. I know our committee certainly appreciates your appearance. Madam Chair, I have one question, then I would like to share my time and give Ms. May the opportunity to have a few minutes to speak to the ministers as well. Ministers, back home in Nova Scotia, the Halifax Port Authority administers about 260 acres of federally owned land situated at multiple points around the navigable waters of beautiful, I'm a little bit biased, but beautiful Halifax Harbour. I'd like to know more about how Bill C-69 would change the way ports conduct their assessments, and if this means maybe a strengthened oversight for projects on port lands. I also would like to know if there's a possibility that this Bill C-69, that assessments for projects could be conducted by the agency itself.
So thank you very much for the question. So the Impacts Assessment Act, it provides oversight for all projects on federal lands. So that would include port lands. and they would be required to undergo a rigorous assessment. The port authorities would be required to look at whether a project is likely to cause significant environmental impacts. And they would need to consider adverse impacts on the rights of Indigenous peoples. They would need to consider Indigenous traditional knowledge and community knowledge, public comments, as well as mitigation measures that would mitigate any significant adverse environmental effects. But I'm going to ask the president of Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency to add to that.
Thank you, Chair. I would just add to the minister's comments that on all federal lands, including ports, federal authorities will be required to assess environmental effects of a potential project that is not designated on the project list. They're already required to do that, Chair, but now the new act is going to stipulate the types of things that they need to look at. It's also going to require them to provide opportunities for public and Indigenous engagement and to report transparently on the registry what is being done and what the follow-up is from those assessments. In addition, as the Minister noted, if a project activity, etc., is on the project list, then even if it's on federal land, it will be subject to an assessment by the agency. My final point would be that even for a non-designated project on the project list, any Canadian or even the federal authority, the port itself, could request the minister to designate the project, and she would be required to provide a response as to her decision related to that request.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will share the remainder of my time with Elizabeth May.
So I want to start by thanking Darren and other Liberal members of the committee who agreed to allow me to put a question to the minister. Thank both ministers for being here. I just went back and, preparing for this morning, reviewed your mandate letters and find that the Prime Minister used identical language in the letter to Minister Carr and to Minister McKenna on the subject before us today. So I'm just going to read it into the record that you are to, quote, restore robust oversight and thorough environmental assessment of areas under federal jurisdiction, close quote, to determine what areas of federal jurisdiction will be recipients of this review and robust oversight. I turn to the recommendations of the final report of the expert panel, in which the expert panel, under findings and recommendations at page 18, says the following: that the federal EA must, or rather federal IA must respect the Constitution, cannot apply to every project, but should be conducted on a project plan or policy that has clear links to matters of federal interest. These federal interests include, at a minimum, federal lands, federal funding, and federal government as proponent, as well as, and then in the interest of time I won't read out the 11 subcategories, but they're all important: species at risk, fish, marine plants, Indigenous peoples and lands, and so on. So my question, particularly to Minister McKenna, since the IA portion of the legislation is under her name, if she agrees with the high-level panel that this is the minimum level of federal review as required by her mandate letter.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank you, Ms. May, for all your advocacy and all your work over the years. I know you care greatly about the environment, but in particular about environmental assessments. When we looked at we certainly took the input of the expert panel. We received a lot of other input as well. And what is the goal of environmental assessments, or now we're calling it impact assessments? It's to make sure that you're considering the projects that will have a significant impact on the range of factors. So there was this proposal to have it on any federal funding, but the impact could be that you could have very, very small works because there was a tie to federal funding that would necessarily trigger a review. We think that our focus, we have hit the right, we're consulting on the project list, but we think that that we should focus on federal impact assessments on projects that have the most potential for adverse effects in areas of federal jurisdiction related to the environment.
And another question, the minister must be aware that federal environmental assessment since the early 1970s has primarily been a tool of planning and information for the federal government in exercising its decision-making, and that federal planning since 1974, any project involving federal funding right through till 2012, has always had at least an initial screening. Recently,
Ms.
we
May,
hadn't. Yes.
I hate to do this, but 3 minutes goes very fast.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
we're
Madam
out
Chair.
of time, and we have Ms. Duncan for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'd like to reiterate what Ms. May just called for. I'm deeply troubled, and I know that many who have submitted comments on the bill are deeply troubled, that the minister is given complete discretion whether or not to conduct a review, complete discretion whether or not to allow a province to deliver a review instead of the federal government, and complete discretion to decide whether or not she's going to look at impacts to fisheries or to First Nations or transboundary impacts. My question to the minister would be on the regional and strategic assessments. The bill provides absolutely no specific criteria to trigger any regional or strategic assessment, and it's not really clear who would deliver that. The only strategic assessment I'm aware of that's proceeding right now was directed by UNESCO, and the minister, in her wisdom, sloughed that off to Parks Canada within their existing budget. So I wonder if the minister can advise us on how our strategic and regional assessments going to be delivered, who will have responsibility, and what will the triggers be?
Thank you very much for the question. I just want to just clarify at the beginning that there's no criteria for a project to be considered. That there's going to be a project list. We're actually consulting on the criteria for the project list right now. In terms of regional and strategic assessments, as we said, we believe they're critical because right now, and everyone agrees, I was almost across the board. You had industry, environmentalists, Indigenous people saying that we need to do that. We know that we need to be engaging provinces and territories, that we're in a federation, so you need to be working together. And as my deputy noted, there's an ability to request a strategic or regional assessment, and then there's a decision made with transparent. There has to be transparency in why a decision was made to go ahead or not. But if maybe my deputy would like to say something.
Just further to that, as the minister had noted earlier, the first strategic assessment will be on climate change and the consideration of how, in terms of guidance to project proponents and consideration of project reviews, addressing our Paris commitments in the Pan-Canadian Framework will be considered.
Let me give you a specific, okay? We have a cabinet directive on strategic assessment. How does that tie to Section 92?
So for strategic assessments, and that obviously forms some of the context, but the agency will be working to provide guidance on strategic and regional assessments that will be consulted on. The Act provides for a high-level advisory committee who will also provide guidance that then can form the basis for those exercises, as I noted, working with provinces and territories through the Open Science Platform to put the information out, to define areas of high ecosystem value and interest to look at, to provide these results transparently through an open process that the public can engage in and that can be commented on in draft and final form.
Thank you very much. That concludes our third round. I want to thank both ministers and their teams very much for spending the full 2 hours with us, giving us a chance to get a good start to this study. Before I end the meeting, I want to remind the committee next week's a bit of a different setup, so I want to remind you all we have the commissioner coming on Tuesday, and she's going to come just for an hour after all, which means after that we're going to work on finalizing our witnesses, do some committee business. All right. On Wednesday, we have a meeting that goes from 3:30 to 6:30. We're going to have Minister Garneau from 3:30 to 4:30. We're going to have his officials from 4:30 to 5, and then we're going to have a panel of industry witnesses. On Thursday, it's a Friday sitting schedule, so we are going to have an 8:30 to 11:30, no, to 10:30 committee meeting with a panel of industry witnesses, and that will complete our work next week. Just wanted to remind you what we have up for next week. Elizabeth, yes?
I just wanted to tell you all the dolphins got out of Heart's Delight, Newfoundland. The bay opened up, the ice is gone, and they're all celebrating the dolphins. I just thought the Environment Committee would want to know.
There you go. Thank you very much for that, and I wish you all a good weekend, and thanks again for everybody's.